Morning, everyone. By the way, Dwayne, fight on, beat the Irish. I lost half the audience with that comment. Sorry, UCLA alum. So as Dwayne mentioned, my name's Keegan Riley. I lead North America storage for HPE. I came to HPE via the acquisition of a company called Nimble Storage just a few months ago. And when I learned that we were going to be acquired by HPE, my first thought was, sweet, I get to go to the Nth Symposium at Disneyland again. So I'll start by saying thank you to the Nth team. So to Rich, to Jan, to Dwayne, to Dan, and to everybody involved at Nth Generation, thank you for putting on a spectacular event for how many years in a row now? 17 years in a row. I think my first Nth Symposium was about 10 years ago. This is my second stint at HP. I was part of the Left Hand Networks team. And back in 2008, I kind of think of those times as the quaint old days in the world of data storage. It was so much simpler then, right? It was, pick your block storage appliance, kind of apples to apples. Do you want Granny Smith? Do you want Honeycrisp? So on and so forth. Pretty straightforward, right? And we walked uphill to school with no shoes, and we didn't have iPads. Anyway, it's a simpler time. I'm here to talk to you today about what the storage ecosystem looks like today. And I'll start, I think there's kind of two interesting trends on the vendor side of things. One of these is sort of the natural ebb and flow of our industry, right? You always see, and some of us have participated in this before, you see kind of innovation and expansion and new startup companies that kind of come to play. And then over the course of time, you see consolidation and acquisitions and things like that. The last wave of consolidation, I would argue, occurred in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe. You had Left Hand Networks and 3PAR acquired by HPE. You had EqualLogic and Compellent go to Dell. You had Data Domain and Isilon go to EMC. A lot of really fine companies that had built innovative file systems and innovative new ways of solving your business issues. And they were all acquired by larger companies. And then you kind of start the game over again. And some of those founders went on to do some other interesting things. We're now in the midst of another wave of consolidation. And so what you see is, if you would have gone to VMworld 3 to 4 years ago, there'd be approximately 132 booths there that had all flash storage in their value prop, and they were all well-funded by VCs. And so for you as a customer, trying to separate the signal from the noise and who can actually help me achieve my goals became fairly difficult. And now, I think if you look at some of the trends in the marketplace, there's other variables like how do I incorporate hybrid cloud into my strategy? How do I think about server-based storage? How do I think about hyper-converged? It's almost like it's no longer, do I prefer Granny Smith or Red Delicious? It's now like, do I want apples, pineapples, or vacuum cleaners, right? It becomes harder for you to determine. Luckily, the cream rises to the top, and eventually of those 132 companies at VMworld, the ones that actually have an interesting product that solves business needs, eventually the market speaks and they separate themselves, and those are the ones that tend to find homes. So that's one portion of what's happening in the industry. The other thing that I think is really interesting is there's a broader macroeconomic shift that's going on, and this is not unique to storage. So 2 to 3 years ago, there was an appetite amongst investors to invest in high growth, almost growth at any cost type business models. Profits be damned, right? Regardless of whether you were generating profits for your companies, you could secure investor funds. That is no longer the case, and not to speak ill of investors, but they tend to be like lemmings, right? And one runs off the cliff and says, you must be profitable, and they all follow. So we're now operating in a context where even firms that were darlings of Wall Street months ago, take Palo Alto Networks, for example, has now replaced their VP of sales because he didn't pivot to kind of a fiscally responsible strategy quickly enough for the appetite of investors. So that presents a challenge for firms like Nimble pre-acquisition, because now you have to make a decision between investing in R&D and investing in good ideas and lowering your costs to become profitable. So it's a big part of why we chose to become a part of HPE. We now don't have to make those trade-offs, and our R&D budget tripled overnight. So that's good for us. This is the vendor side. There's also some interesting things happening on the consumer side. And the analogy that I use, I always like to give examples from my own life. If I think about 15, 20 years ago when I went on sales trips, I would call an airline, I would book a flight, I would have a paper ticket to get on the plane, and when I landed in a new city, I would get on the Avis rental car bus and go pick up a car, and then I'd pull out a Thomas guide and I'd go to cell C3 and kind of highlight the path to the sales calls. It was all highly manual, and half the room has no idea what I'm talking about because they're millennials and they were born in a post-iPhone era. Today, when I land in a new city, literally before I get to the gate, I fire up my iPhone, I hail an Uber. Sometimes I just book a room at someone's house when I'm arriving in the city because it's cheaper than the Marriott. And then I use the Waze app on my phone to make sure that I'm getting to my sales calls in the fastest route possible. And if there's an accident in real time, my phone literally routes me around it and gets me there faster. My entire experience as a consumer of technology has changed in a very fundamental way. At the same time, you've seen companies use technology and use digital transformation to gain a competitive advantage over other companies in their industry. Starbucks is a great example of this. Starbucks is in a very old business. They take coffee beans, grind them, and make coffee to sell to you. It doesn't get any more basic than that. But a couple years ago, Starbucks had a challenge. Their same-store sales, the growth had stagnated. And when they looked into this problem, what they found is, in a lot of these stores, the queues were getting long. And if you're walking up and you want a coffee and you see 20 people in line, you're likely to walk by the Starbucks and go to Dwayne's coffee shop and pick up a cup of coffee. It's not as good as Starbucks. I mean, he doesn't even have pumpkin spice lattes there, but you don't want to wait, so you go buy a coffee from Dwayne. What Starbucks did is they created an app that allowed the consumer to pre-order a drink and tell the company what time they were going to come and pick it up so it was ready. So now, I don't have to go to Dwayne's coffee shop. My pumpkin spice latte is ready when I get there. Within 6 months, they saw same-store sales increase by 20%. So think about that. One of the oldest businesses in the world used digital transformation to put Dwayne out of business and grow their same-store sales by 20%. This is the type of digital transformation that is impacting every single industry. I don't care what industry you're in, your industry is being transformed somehow, some way with digital transformation. And your internal customers have different expectations for how they interact with technology, especially the younger generation that's coming into the workforce. They want immediacy. The concept of waiting on a batch job to do their job is completely foreign to them. They want instant gratification. So the world has changed in a very big way. And you as CIOs, it used to be about keeping the lights on and paying the maintenance bills and kind of keeping things working. Now I think CIO should stand for Chief Innovation Officer. You have to find ways to deliver new applications to drive revenue, and you have to find ways to do this in a post-cloud world. And so this, in almost every case, involves hybrid IT. And the mission of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which it's always a good thing if you can say your mission in 3 sentences, our mission is to make hybrid IT simple, to power the intelligent edge, and to bring the services to bear to help you do this effectively. And we believe at HPE Storage that storage is the foundation of any good hybrid IT strategy. If you think about it, and we always thought about it this way in data storage startups, storage is the only stateful part of your infrastructure, right? If your network goes down, okay, it causes a temporary blip. If you lose hosts, okay, in a virtualized world, who really cares? But if you lose data, you've got a real problem on your hands. So any hybrid IT strategy is rooted in data storage. The other trend that's going on in the market, and as you just heard from the Micron presentation there, which I thought was great, Flash is becoming the new normal. So we're in sort of the third wave of this all-flash revolution. The first wave was all around performance. So think about companies like Fusion.io and Violin Memory. These were pioneers in the world of all-flash. It was ungodly expensive back in those days, but if you had an application that demanded hundreds of thousands of IOPS and low latency, you were willing to pay for it. The second wave of Flash, we used data reduction software to bring the costs somewhat in line with high-end tier 1 arrays, and now it became a little bit more palatable for your tier 1 applications, right? Today, in the third wave, Flash has become the new normal. So the data reduction software has gotten better. The software in terms of being able to use commodity-grade SSDs has gotten better, and the cost has come down. So today, if anyone tells you to run your tier 1 applications on anything with spinning disk in it, they're doing you a disservice. Flash is the new normal for all tier 1 applications. Interestingly, only 61% of businesses have deployed all Flash. So if you're in that 39%, Dwayne and the Ant team want to talk to you about deploying all Flash in your data center. At HPE Storage, and I'll give you a warning, this is the commercial part of it. We do obviously want to support HPE, so I'll give you a couple slides here on HPE products. I believe that we have the deepest and broadest portfolio of Flash solutions in the marketplace, bar none. I think our competition is either overly simplistic or they've got a Chinese menu of hundreds of SKUs and they're a little bit confused and are going to have to do some product rationalization. I'm sure you can guess who I'm talking about with that one. But whether you've got a 4-figure budget and you're all about the economics of dollar per gig, or you've got an 8-figure budget and you're all about bulletproof, extremely resilient hardware, we've got you covered. And we love you the same. We love you a little more if you have an 8-figure budget, but we love you all the same, and we've got products for everybody. We also have you covered in terms of your consumption model. So hyperconverged is one of those new trends that's really kind of been pioneered over the last 5-6 years. We have the best hyperconverged product on the market with SimpliVity. And if you haven't looked at that, for workloads that are scale everything, right, where you need to scale compute, network, and storage all at once, hyperconverged is a great way to go. If you're building a new VDI instance, hyperconverged all day, every day. If you're rolling a Hadoop implementation, hyperconverged all day, every day. We also are starting to push forward in what we call composable. So think of this as infrastructure as code. Synergy is our composable solution, and it's incredible in the way that it can deploy resources to meet your applications in the most efficient way possible. It's really, really cool stuff. And as someone that 6 months ago was pushing SmartStack with Cisco UCS, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I was totally wrong. Synergy's way cooler. So take a look at Synergy if you haven't. But at the core of our all-flash strategy here, we've got the nimble storage all-flash arrays, and we've got the 3-par store-serve arrays. We believe that these are going to cover us in 98% of cases. Nimble storage is great if you want something that is operationally very simple to deploy and to consume throughout the life cycle. 3-par is the world's most flexible, most resilient, most adaptable solution for multi-cloud environments. So one of the two of these is going to meet all of your needs. The great thing is you don't have to choose on availability. They're both 6 nines platforms. We also bring to bear a data protection portfolio that's second to none. So whether it's store once with Cloud Bank or nimble secondary flash appliances where you can actually put your test dev and your secondary storage to work as if it were primary, we've got you covered. And we've got deep partnerships with all of the software companies in this space. End of commercial for the products. I'd submit to you that everything I just said is really, really cool, but the difference between the worst all-flash array on the market and the best all-flash array on the market is 10 to 15% in either direction. Any vendor that comes in and tells you, yeah, you know, my competition, it's probably going to set your data center on fire, the rep's probably going to kick a puppy on the way in, and you're going to get fired if you buy it. Probably a little disingenuous, right? Everybody's stuff works at this point. To my point earlier, there were 132 companies before. There's only a few now. Those that have survived and that have made it, the stuff works. So what you have to think about as an I&O leader are things beyond the box. How do you think about a timeless business model with your infrastructure? How do you ensure that you avoid the experience that I know you've all had where at month 35 of a deployment, your vendor comes to you and says, here's your maintenance bill, and here's your cost of forklift upgrade. Magically, the forklift is $1 cheaper than the maintenance renewal. It's a very old way of doing things, right? Don't fall for that crap anymore. If you don't want to, if you're OpEx oriented in your business and you never want to spend $1 of CapEx again, your vendor should be able to meet you there. That's what I mean when I talk about a timeless business model. And you've got to be cloud ready. How many people have had the experience where your CFO goes on a trip, comes back with an airline magazine, drops it on your desk and says, what are we doing about cloud? Sound familiar? Every business needs to have a cloud strategy. And whether you're at the very beginning of that journey or you're 95% in the public cloud and struggling to bring some of that back on-prem, wherever you are on that journey, you have to have a cloud strategy, and your vendors have to be ready to help you achieve where you want to get in a way that's not going to lock you in either direction. And third, You've got to apply predictive analytics to keep your infrastructure healthy. 10 years ago, we talked about 80% of budget going to keeping the lights on. The reason that you can't afford to do that anymore is because you're always asked to do more with less. So how do you keep the lights on? Because you can no longer, you can't afford to just walk away from those responsibilities. The answer is you use automation, you use data analytics, you use software to help you keep your infrastructure well. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit now. So I'll give you an analogy here. Cars of the future will be self-driving. 20 years ago, that probably would have been a pretty provocative statement. I mean, even the Jetsons drove their own cars, right? We thought we were going to have flying cars before we had self-driving cars. But today, you can actually see the finish line here. So there's a lot of companies that are racing to establish an early lead in the self-driving autonomous automobile industry. You've got Tesla, you've got Google, you've got Uber, and they're all taking a different approach, but the one thing that they're all doing is they're all putting thousands of sensors in the cars, and they're collecting that information and applying global correlation to build algorithms that will eventually handle actuators in the car, right? So you're collecting all the sensor data. Eventually, you're going to turn on those actuators, and the car is going to turn itself, right? There's a parallel here. What if you could do that for infrastructure? What if you could leverage rich telemetry, cloud-based analytics, and global learning to allow your infrastructure to drive itself? Cool, right? This was the idea behind something called InfoSight that we invented at Nimble Storage. So one of our founding theses, we had two at Nimble. One was that Flash was going to disrupt billion-dollar product lines. That was also provocative in 2009, but not so much today. But the other founding thesis was, in a cloud-connected world, the client should never know more about what's going on in their infrastructure than we do. Let's view every system as being at the edge of our network versus being outside of our network and something that we don't know anything about. So the first thing that we did is we installed sensors in our code. And we started collecting data from the Nimble storage arrays from literally array number 1 that shipped. And we've got about 30,000 systems deployed today. Each one of those systems sends back on average 70 million telemetry points per day per system. And it's not just information from the array. We're going up the stack and we're collecting information from, for example, vCenter. So we have visibility all the way up to the hypervisor layer. That comes back to us, and anybody can collect data, right? But log data is no longer all that interesting. Where it gets interesting is when you apply cloud-based predictive analytics and deep data science to curate that data and ask the right questions. And then once you've asked the right questions and built some algorithms that do some interesting things predictively, you apply global learning. So just like Tesla is collecting information from every car out there, and your self-driving Tesla in Southern California will benefit from the learnings of a self-driving Tesla in Shanghai, it's the same thing with InfoSight. Those 30,000 systems that are deployed, if we learn something about a system in Shanghai, we're going to apply it to all of our other clients everywhere else in the world. And that delivers a network effect where the system gets more and more powerful the more systems you add to it. So what does this allow us to do? Who cares, right? If it's a really interesting engineering feat that we've accomplished, but it means nothing to your business, then it's really not marketable. Here's what we've been able to do. At Nimble Storage, 85% of support cases were initiated by us and auto-resolved. So that means 8.5 out of 10 times, you're not calling the vendor to say, I've got a problem. The vendor is calling you and saying, not only do you have a problem, but here's the resolution, and would you like me to fix it for you? Think about how different that could be in your business. Second, because we're connected to 98% of our systems, and the 2% that don't use InfoSight tend to be 3-letter acronyms that are at black sites that, trust me, nothing's getting out. Because we've got that visibility, I can tell you that we have a real-world uptime of 6 nines. Seconds of downtime per year across 30,000 systems. And this is not like in an eLab, hypothetically, if you've got perfect firmware, right? So this is a highly available system. And then finally, we attempted to quantify our customer success because we believe that InfoSight has led to a dramatically different experience. And what we found is we have a net promoter score of 85. And with over 12,000 customers, it's not easy to achieve a high NPS score. So we're really, really proud of this metric. The stat that I'll give you that I think gives us such customer delight is 54% of the time, The problems that we're solving are not storage problems. So even as a standalone storage company, we were solving other people's problems. Let me give you an example of this. Recently, we had a client who we called and said, hey, it looks like you're having some issues here. And he said, yeah, I just updated my ESX firmware and my Nimble firmware, and all of a sudden my throughput has gone down by 10x, my latency is spiked, basically the system is unusable and I have no idea what happened, and because I upgraded firmware on 2 different systems, I don't even know where to begin to diagnose this. So we dug in, we started looking at it, and over the course of about 59 minutes, we determined that there was a bug in ESX that was causing illegal ESX iSCSI handling. And illegal iSCSI handling is what got Dwayne put on double secret probation back at USC. So he was really scared when he heard about that. No, I'm just kidding. So what was actually happening is it was misinterpreting iSCSI commands, and where it should have done nothing, it was writing a whole bunch of zeros. ESX was doing this. That's a problem for the application, right? So we came up with a fix for this particular client. We rolled them back to a different version of Nimble firmware with a little bit of a patch that we had created custom for them to handle this, which is pretty cool, right? We solved a VMware bug in our system and we fixed it inside of 60 minutes. So from root cause to resolution, in less than an hour is pretty cool. But here's where it gets interesting. We then said, who else is going to have this problem? And we looked across the entire install base and we found 600 clients that were running iSCSI, the previous version of ESX with a clean upgrade path to this version of ESX and this particular version of Nimble firmware. And we said, uh-oh, these 600 people are gonna have a problem. And so using InfoSight, we actually blacklisted them. We made it impossible for them to put themselves in harm's way until VMware created a patch for this bug. That's pretty cool. That's the power of InfoSight. It goes beyond just kind of break fix type things though. If you think about kind of traditional monitoring systems, it'll give you graphs like this with latency over time, and you'll see latency spikes, and that's cool that you can kind of produce a pretty graph. But what do you do with this? It actually creates more questions than answers. So if I look at this, I'm like, uh-oh, we've got a latency spike. We've got to fix that. But the questions that you actually should be asking are, should I even be concerned about this? And if I am, how do I solve this? So InfoSight gives you things like performance impact scores and correlated performance factors. It'll take multiple graphs and look at them and say, this latency spike is actually not a big problem because you're not seeing an IOPS spike here. What this probably is, and in actually the real example here, it was a backup job kicking off. Who cares, right? It's happening at night. It's not impacting other applications. Don't try to fix that problem. But that smaller latency spike, holy cow, what's happening to the IOPS over there? Turns out that that was cache overrun on a host. So that's a problem that we do want to solve. And by the way, here's the resolution to it. Would you like us to help you with it? That's where we're driving with InfoSight, right? So pretty cool stuff. So again, we're correlating data and we're solving problems beyond storage. The whole goal of InfoSight is to take what are historically very difficult, complex, cross-stack problems and present a solution to them in a visual, easy to understand, and actionable way. That's the beauty behind InfoSight. And it's not just keeping your infrastructure well, it's also cost avoidance. Keep your infrastructure balanced, right? Avoid unnecessary upgrades. Deploy your infrastructure in the way that's most efficient for your business and repurpose underutilized assets to do other things. Somewhat bad for us because we'd like to sell you more stuff. But our belief is if we do right by you and we allow you to be better at your jobs, you're going to continue to come back with us. So where we're going with this is, we've got kind of a new mantra inside of InfoSight, and that is see once, prevent for all. So anything that we see, we should be able to solve for the entire install base. And the way we accomplish this is via automation. Okay? If you rely on people to address the level 1 and level 2 type things, that can be problematic. No one likes the interaction of you calling in and saying, hey, I've got a problem, and the person on the other end says, what's your name? What's the serial number? Run these diags, FTP them back to me, and maybe in 73 hours we'll have an intelligent person on the phone actually starting to solve your problem. You don't like that, they don't like that, And the intelligent person that comes on at hour 73 is like, why is the customer yelling at me? I've only been on for 2 minutes. Well, yeah, it's the 73rd hour for the client. That's why they're yelling at you. No one likes that. And it's not effective. So if we can automate everything in that experience, which we should be able to do, and we can identify all of these issues and tell the system, solve this issue for all of our clients, then it gets pretty interesting, right? Then it starts getting into the world of like Skynet and Terminator, where machines are healing machines and they eventually take over the world. And if that happens, someone go back in time and kill Rod Bagg, the inventor of InfoSight. So let me just lay out the vision and tell you where we're going with this. I talked a little bit about going up the stack. This is a big part of why we chose to become a part of HPE, because there's only so much you can do if you're just a one-product storage company, right? And for as strategic as I felt we were to VMware and Microsoft and Oracle at Nimble Storage, now that I've got a VP title at HPE and I'm going into these meetings, I'm like, oh, that was cute. We thought we were strategic to them as a tiny little, HPE is very strategic to these folks. We've got a massive R&D budget, and we own all of the assets below the hypervisor. So if we can bring InfoSight to everything else in the HPE infrastructure portfolio, 3PAR, SimpliVity, ProLiant, Synergy, so on and so forth, if we can leverage relationships with VMware, Microsoft, Oracle, we'll start going deeper into the hypervisor, and we've already started going up into databases as well. You're going to get better cross-stack correlation amongst the whole system, and you're going to get better decision making in that automation engine. So going up the stack is kind of one axis on this. The other is as we push forward with the data sciences and the machine learning, we're already doing this peer learning, and we're already kind of building what has been called the largest anonymized data set about infrastructure in the world. As we start playing with simulations and models and things like that, and if there's Nimble clients in the room that are not participating in InfoSight labs, I would strongly encourage you to get involved with that, because that's where the innovation is happening. A lot of the advancements with InfoSight are coming out of InfoSight labs. Where we're eventually driving with this, we're kind of doing semi-supervised automation right now. We've got what we call the last mile problem, right? So at some point, when we go to this zero-day prevention and full automation of the infrastructure, it's kind of like when Tesla finally turns on the full self-driving mode in the car, right? The infrastructure manages itself, it keeps itself well, it alerts you and says, hey, do you want me to turn left? And you can say, no, there's a lake there, we shouldn't turn left. So right, it's not going to be like you can't touch the steering wheel, but this stuff will drive itself. And there's kind of a third axis that I like to talk about, but it doesn't look well on the PowerPoint slide. And that is, right now, we're doing all of this for on-prem. We're also starting to do this for cloud volumes and for some of the things that we're doing around new stack and things like that. So ultimately, you could think about InfoSight becoming your cloud-based management and wellness tool, whether it's on-prem, public cloud, service providers, and in some cases even SaaS applications. We're working with some SaaS companies that kind of have what they call the black box issue, right, where they don't know necessarily what's happening with the application. So InfoSight, everybody's got a big, hairy, audacious goal. I even heard that from BJ earlier. Our BHAG for InfoSight is supporting all of your applications wherever they may live in a hybrid IT journey. And we've got a lead over anybody else that's trying to do this. And imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. I heard Cisco released a product called InterSight, which I'm like, really? Like McDonald's and McDowell's here? That's okay. But this is where we're taking this. So we're really, really excited about it. Again, we believe we've got the broadest portfolio of all flash on the planet, but this is where it really gets interesting. It's artificial intelligence for the data center, right? And this is what's given us a huge advantage, and it's where we're going to double down from an R&D perspective. And so I know I touched mostly on predictive here. There's so much else in the HPE story now that should be interesting to you. Things like cloud volumes, things like cloud banks, things like the timeless storage upgrades and 6.9's guarantees and everything like that. Sit down with your nth generation rep or your HPE rep and you can understand a little bit more about these things. I'll leave you with this. I mean, this is sort of our brag slide here. And I'm a few months back into Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And I'm really proud to be a part of this company. I mean, if you think about it, Hewlett-Packard truly invented Silicon Valley. We've got a 75-year heritage in technology. As our president Antonio likes to say, we've got a God-given right to lead in the server and storage category because we invented it, right? And so we're going to bring the best of Nimble Storage and the best of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise together, and forget about the fact that, you know, we're number one in market share and we're in the Gartner Leader Quadrant and everything like that. What this truly comes down to is our people, okay? And you've heard a lot about culture at Nth. I think this is why it's such a great partnership between Nth Generation and HPE. We think about culture in the same way. It matters, right? At Nimble, we always had a policy when we hired people. We said it was the no jerks policy. It was originally called something else, but we made it a little bit more PG over time as we hired an HR department. But the idea behind the no jerks policy is, listen, if I don't want to have a beer with this person after work, why would I want to work with them every day? For better or worse, you spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family. You might as well like your coworkers, right? And you guys have a lot of options in terms of who you do business with. You might as well like your vendors. So I'll leave you with that. It's all about culture. It's all about good people, passionate people that are excellent at their jobs, partnering with you to help you achieve your business initiatives, to help you use digital transformation to put your competition out of business the way Starbucks put Dwayne's Coffee out of business. Okay? So again, thank you very much for the time, Nth. Thank you to everyone here. And if you need me, I'll be in line at the Cars ride. I hear the line's like 3 hours right now.